Hello, my name is Brian Rocks, and today we're going to go over some real basics of UV unwrapping. What we'll do, um, I'll go over just a real basic of what unwrapping is, and then we'll actually take an object and go ahead and unwrap it and throw a quick texture on it just so you can see what's happening. So now UV unwrapping is a process where you take the model or pieces of it and you unwrap it and lay it flat um, onto a 2D plane to prep for texturing, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. Now the first up, I will go to blank layer here, and I'm going to just add a cube because it's the easiest way to explain this. Now if you were to like lay this out, you couldn't just unwrap this cube. I mean, technically in the real world you couldn't just unwrap this without making some cuts along the edges or anywhere else really. Um, and that's what we'll do here. We're going to go ahead and take one of your windows and select the UV image editor. And I usually start off with a new image. I usually just call it grid. And you can select the dimensions. This is 1024 by 1024, which will be fine for this example. Now if I left this as it is, the color would just be the color of the image that gets created. With this selected as blank, I'm just going to pick UV grid. You also have the choice of color grid. It's the same idea. It's just got colors and numbers instead of the crosses and the black and white checkerboard, but it's the same thing. It allows you to see the deformation of the texture on the object once you have it unwrapped. So go ahead and unwrap this here. Actually put that back to solid. Go ahead and just tab to edit mode, and now if we're just going to hit unwrap on this, as it is, you can see it just lays it out flat, overlapping each side on itself, which isn't what you want, because usually when you unwrap something it's because you want a varied texture on all the different faces here. So you could go into hit U to open up the unwrap menu, and you could choose like cube projection, and you can see it lays it out, but it did still overlay a couple of the faces here. Let's get the face select, and you can see it just laid it out like as it is, but it did overlap a couple of these faces here, and that's not usually what you want. And the best way to do that is to go ahead and cut you're not cutting the model, you're just cutting the UV process. You're just cutting the UV that is laid out on the image. So like for a cube, you can cut it a bunch of different ways, but normally you want to lay like one of these tops open. So if you cut it along these three edges, it'll open this up like a flap. And cut down this edge here, and we'll just cut these three so you can see which edges I have selected there. We'll see what that does. Go ahead and Control E, and it brings up your edge menu, and just click on Mark Seam, and you can see it changes all those edges to red, indicating that that's where it's going to be cut when you unwrap it. So actually select all the vertices there, and go ahead and just U to unwrap menu, and then hit unwrap, and there you go. You can see you have each individual face laid out, and there's nothing uh, overlapped at all. And then you can export this layout as a PNG or a JPEG and throw it into Photoshop or GIMP and paint up your texture, and then save the texture and bring it back here and apply it. Say if like you wanted like a metal texture here and painted texture here or something, you could do that just by doing that in Photoshop. I use GIMP myself because I don't have the money for Photoshop, and it works just fine. So that is the gist of unwrapping an object. There are a ton of options here, which I'm not going to go over now. The two that I use most are the unwrap, once I've figured out what seams I want to cut, and also project from view, which is exactly as it says. If I were to just unwrap, you can see that it unwrapped it basically just by taking this view and flopping it down here on the image. And it's useful for like flat areas, I guess. I use it a lot for that, because then you get no distortion. And actually, let me show you the grid there. Go into texture mode here, and now you can see how that works. Since I unwrapped it from the top view, you have the top and the you have this whole cube here. Let me select one of these faces, and you can see it's just exactly that. It's just projected from the top through the bottom. So you can see you have no distortion on the top and bottom, but on the sides it's all stretched out because it's running parallel to these edges here. So if I'm going to go back to U, unwrap, since I have the seams cut, lays it back out as so, and you can see right there that you have a nice application of the texture there, because there's no distortion at all. And if you were to like take one of these faces, you can see how it works here, because it doesn't really matter where any of this stuff is on the image. You can use the A key to select everything, G to grab, S to scale, R to rotate, just like you would in the 3D window. And you'd use that if you had a bunch of objects unwrapped and you need to get them all arranged for yourself or whoever's going to be texturing the model in in whatever coherent fashion you could. Because sometimes, say if you had a bunch of pieces and you wouldn't need a lot of detail on some, you'd have say one piece, covering a big part of the image to get as much detail as possible, and then another piece would be scaled down and maybe thrown off to the side a little bit because it wouldn't need that much detail. And this scaling here does not affect the size or position of the object itself. It's just the texture space that it operates within there. So you have a lot of freedom to move around, and you don't have to worry about too much about messing anything up by screwing around on this side here. Now I'm going to go ahead and actually just unwrap something and throw a texture on it really quick so you can see what's going on. Go back, where was I here? Let's go to, I don't know if I separated that yet. Don't think I did. Nope. So I'm going to just unwrap this and throw a texture on it. Just one of these pipes. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. P to, oops, didn't want to do that. P to separate. And I'm going to go ahead and throw it on my cube layer there. Oh, did I select something here I didn't want to? I did. Let's get rid of that. and we will get rid of our cube. And let me go ahead and actually just scale this up so you can see it. Now for something like this, we'll need to do a little bit of adjustment. That's why I picked it, so you can see what we can do over here with the UVs. Now to unwrap this, hit U and then unwrap, and you can see it just throws a big mess down there at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and make some seams on here. And one thing to keep in mind when you're marking seams on a model, you want to mark them in the least conspicuous place, because sometimes there'll be a barely perceptible seam along where you cut it when you apply the texture. So it's just best to, do the best to cut it where the camera isn't going to be facing, so it's hidden. Like on a person, you'd cut, around the hairline, or in this case, I'm cutting on the bottom because it's not going to be in view at all. So, so I'm going to go ahead and just Alt select that edge and Control E, mark that seam, and go ahead and unwrap it again. Oops. And there you can see a little better, but we still have a lot of distortion there. Watch when we hit the texture, and you can see what's happening. Whoops. Should do something else here. Whoops, second. There we go. And you can see the distortion. This doesn't look so bad, but then you get down. I gotta actually do something here. Recalculate that so we're looking at the outside. And turn that off so we're not seeing the backside. Okay. And you can see down here where it's going to come into a point. I don't have an end cap on here, do I? Let's see. Nope, doesn't look like it. So that unwrapped pretty awful. So I'm going to go ahead and do another couple cuts here. We'll do one, oops, I don't want face select, do that. Cut around this edge here, probably cut around that one, and that one. So Control E and mark those seams. Select all that and then unwrap again, and still a mess. These don't look too bad here. I don't know what is going on with this here. Oh, there is a cap on that. Get rid of that face. Did not know that face was still there. Go ahead and select all these again. Unwrap, and that's doing what I want it to. And you can see we got a little bit of squished. It's a little bit squished there, and we can just adjust this on this side. Just get a decent view there. Now to straighten these up, I'm going to, that's that center piece there. See, that doesn't look so bad. We can just leave that as it is. You can straighten these edges out and just like scale Y and then 0. I'm just alt right clicking on that edge to select it all, and S, Y, and 0. I should have hit the 0, probably would have looked better. There we go. And I'm going to go into Island Select. You have different select modes, just like you do in the Edit mode: Vert Select, Edge Select, Face Select, and you can select Island, which would be the whole piece that isn't connected to anything else. So that one's good. Um, these could be straightened up. Just Alt right click, S, X, and then 0. So you're just scaling along the x-axis to 0, so it straightens it all out. These aren't really that deformed, and that's the only reason why doing the UV unwrapping and all that is just really kind of tedious. So, and like these, I'd want to straighten out. You know, there's many ways you can unwrap anything. It's just a lot of just looking at your object and just determining where to cut it and how you want it. See, like this, I could probably let it be, since it's such a small item, that distortion isn't gonna make much of a difference. But if we were to, say, straighten these out, scaling along the y-axis to 0, is that the one which one are we affecting here? There we go. And it's not straightening that out, but let's try this. Just finish this off here. Just scale these along the y-axis, each of them to 0, and I'm going to actually just scale these ends. And that's a lot of times when you have, that's why you don't want like too high poly when you're unwrapping, because then you have just that much more to straighten out. It's a lot of repetition. And I see there's little twists here where this one is still bent up. And I'm going to leave that one just so I'm not wasting time doing the same thing again. But you can see we have a little bit of distortion here, so we could like select this, scale it along the x-axis. You can see how that affects it. Bring it in that way, and you can scale along the y to bring that back to close to square as you can, so you're not having to mess around with too much distortion when you're applying the textures. So, like down in here, it's not going to matter much since it is a smaller object. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this one all curved up. I'm going to go ahead and adjust these a little bit, just because they're, scale that along the y-axis to straighten that out, and same with this one, and then we'll go ahead and save this out and paint on it. And I'm just going to do this really roughly here, so just go with that. So you can see that's pretty decent. And what you want to do once you unwrap an object, I'm going to go ahead and actually just rotate this down and just get all your pieces together, because if there was another object unwrapped on this same image texture, I'd want to kind of keep them separate so things don't get too confusing. If you were to select any number of islands here, you can go to UVs and you can average the scale of all of them, so you have consistent scaling across the object. Move that out. And then you can also, under UV menu, pack islands, which will pack them as best as it can on the whole image. I usually do that just to get them clumped together, and then I'll scale it down to whatever size I need to make room for whatever else I'm going to have on there. But in this case, we'll just go ahead and leave this as it is. Make sure none of them are really overlapping at all. Okay, now we can go ahead and save this out. Under the UV menu, you can just export UV layout. And I'm going to put it here, textures. I'm just going to leave it as a PNG. The opacity is fine. And I'll just call it UV test. And now that that's saved, you can open up your image editor. And I'm going to drag that in. And I'm going to drag in a metal texture that I got here off of cgtextures.com, I believe. And you can see it's a lot bigger than the main image here. I'm just going to scale that down a bit. That'll work, I guess. And oops. I want to move it down below my UV. And let's see what we want to do. I want to go ahead and just scale it up here to cover the object. Now the cool thing with the UVs, if you were to need some detail, like around the edges or something, I can get my drawing pad out. I'm just going to paint some simple some zooms. I'm going to paint some just like wear along the edges or something here. So I'm going to actually turn the opacity here, that layer down a bit, just enough so I can see the edges. I'm going to paint directly on the metal texture. It's a new version of GIMP. It's a little different than the one I was used to. So I'm going to just pick, like, say, I'm going to do brownish. And we'll just do that. And bring the size down a bit. There we go. And I'm going to just go ahead and like paint some, say just pretend this is like some erosion or wear or something along the edge of that cylinder. And I'll do some here. Yeah, I'm not going for quality. And of course you can paint whatever you need to on the object or on your texture here. So I'm going to go ahead and just save this out. We'll go ahead and hide the UV so we don't have that saved as part of the image. We'll go ahead and save this out. And let's do let's call it diffuse. And let's go back into Blender and we will apply this. Oops. I'm just going to throw a new texture on the object here. I'm not going to worry about the color or anything. And I'm going to go into the texture tab and I'm just going to hit new. And under this tab, just image. I'm just going to open the new image here and find it. And under coordinates, I just want to pick UV. And it's already set to color, so. And I'm also going to open it up in here, so just a little image icon and then pick that. So now we can tab in edit mode here and select all the UVs. I'm going to bring that picture back up there. And now you can see that it has applied the texture, and you can see where the edges where I painted the wear marks here or right where I wanted them to be, and so now they're giving you a lot more control um, when you're texturing a model here by unwrapping it. It is a tedious, frustrating, horrible process, but the end results are, more than you can expect usually. I've been surprised at, you know, after unwrapping something and then, going in painting in all the textures and everything, how well it ends up. So there is a reward in the end, but it was something that I put off for a long time learning because it was just confusing, and I still don't understand half of it. And of course, I'm going to go over some more of these functions in detail. I just wanted to get you a head start on just messing with the function itself and for yourself. It's kind of the best way to learn it, but we'll go into in depth a little later in another video once I figure out how to explain the complexity of it, because there's a lot you can do with it. There's a lot of control you have with how you unwrap something other than just using these quick presets by cutting seams, by mixing these different functions on various just a few faces. Say if you want, I could just project from view. I could project from view just like these faces, and then I could unwrap with some seams another part of the model. So you have a lot of control over it. Go ahead and play with it, and we'll touch on this again at some later point. So, and that's about it for this one. So, and thanks for watching.